The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to the Fine to FAB Show with Lisa Lieberman-Wang, helping women reclaim their inner peace and power, going from feeling fine to being fab, fabulous, awesome, beautiful, serving to empower you to break through the barriers that weigh you down, to live an authentic life that is healthy, happy, and free. Now, here's Lisa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Lieberman-Wang, your trusted guide on your journey from feeling fine to being fab. This show is committed to helping women break through the barriers to live an even more authentic life that is healthy, happy, and free. So I hope you join the movement, become part of our active community, and you can do that by texting the keyword FINE to FAB to 90210 and hit send. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter at Lisa Lieberman-Wang, and check out our site at finetofab.com. I'm really excited about our guest, but before I tell you a little bit about her, I just want to let you know that for everything we're doing here, it's all about empowering women to reclaim their inner peace and power. And looking at me now and hearing me now, you'd never know I had a long history of eating disorders, depression, therapy, medical challenges, and countless hospitalizations. And after spending enormous amount of money and looking for the age-old question, to what's wrong with me, I finally figured it out. There was nothing wrong with me. I was just living a life based on other people's beliefs and not my own. And it's been 20 years free of obsessions and self-sabotage. And my mission has been to help other women not have to go through the time, frustration, and aggravation to figure it out, but to find the best leaders out there with the message that can serve the most. And I am so excited to have with me today on the call Tara Sophia Mohr, and she's absolutely phenomenal. She's the founder of the global Playing Big Leadership Program for Women, an expert on women's leadership and well-being. She empowers women to play bigger in their life and in work. She has an MBA from Stanford University, her undergraduate degrees in English literature from Yale. She takes a unique approach that blends inner work and practical skill training, weaves together both intellectual rigor and intuitive wisdom, in addition to sharing her groundbreaking insight and guidance. You can check out her site at taramohr.com. We'll give you the link and where to find it as well on the blog. She's regularly featured on national media ranging from Today's Show, Harvard Business Review, to BeliefNet.com. And in today's show, you're going to learn about 3 key aspects of Tara's flagship Playing Big program that will help you play bigger in life and in work, how to quiet your self-doubt, which is something that took me years to figure out, understanding your fear, and identifying your calling. And Tara, are you with me here?
I am. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Oh, this is my pleasure. And I've been following you for I wanted to say quite some time through emails and then on the site and stuff. And I'm excited that you're going to have this opportunity to serve people at another level through some of our listeners that have not gotten to meet you before. So this is going to be exciting. And I know that you do not you do not have the story of where I came from. I know you actually have a more of a fairy tale story in some respects, and that you've been practicing what you're preaching since you were a kid. So why don't you give a little information to our listeners about where you're coming from and what you're gonna be offering today?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting that you say that, because as you were just sharing a little bit about your story, I thought, I can relate to that so much. So, we all have multiple layers to our stories, but it is true that I was very fortunate. One of the things that I'm most grateful for about my life is that my mother was very interested in psychology and personal growth, and she was very much a spiritual seeker. And so I grew up in a house where, literally there was a wall of books in her bedroom and in the living room that had all kinds of spiritual traditions, Eastern, Western, and I really grew up reading those books and seeing her read them. And she really believed that you could teach kids a lot about psychology and help them develop their own inner awareness. So she would have me tell her my dreams every morning at the breakfast table, probably from the time I was, maybe 6 years old. And I would sit there with my oatmeal and my orange juice, and she would be diagramming the meaning of the dream, and we'd be talking about the symbolism and the wisdom of the unconscious. So that's how I grew up. And that was really amazing because it meant that as I was coming into my adolescence and hitting all those really difficult things like being a girl in junior high and high school and body image issues and dealing with the way that, still every teenage girl, I think, gets sexually harassed as she's walking down the street way more than any of us would want. And, all that stuff that comes, that I had some beginnings of a tool set to process my own emotions and find a spiritual connection in the midst of all of that. So that was certainly a wonderful aspect of my upbringing. But very much like you, in spite of all of that, I certainly diverted from my authentic path and my authentic life through, particularly through my 20s, and coming back to who I really am, learned very much what you did, that the recipe for life satisfaction and happiness is being who we really are in our individual uniqueness and expressing what we want to express in the world.
Right, and a lot of times we question that because I believe we're living in a world where we want to please a lot of people and we become what we think we need to be versus who we are. And getting to that point is sometimes difficult for us. And I say us meaning me and others.
Yeah, so. And, I think one of the big issues is something that I often call leaving the herd, leaving the pack, because it's both that we want to please people, but also as women, we are so relationship oriented, whether you think it's by nature or, by nurture, whether it's biology or how we were raised, whatever your philosophy is on that. We tend to be very attuned to other people, to harmony, to connection. And that can be one of our greatest strengths, but it also has a shadow side when we start to prioritize fitting in, belonging, not rocking the boat, over following the individual path that we each feel called to follow.
Yeah. And I think that happens, for me especially, I personally, there's some of the things that I know we're going to be talking about today, but personally, some of the things that I saw is I wanted to be an achiever based on the values and beliefs that I was brought up with. That was what I thought was the benchmark. And although I achieved every one of them and I've been successful, one of the things that attracted me to what you were doing was playing big. And as successful as I was, people had no idea that internally there was still a struggle going on. And I had this for years and years. And that's really some of the things that got me.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I use that term playing big. And the reason I use it is because I found I started out in my business before I ever had a program called Playing Big, and before I was doing all the kind of media stuff that I was doing now. I started just by coaching women one-on-one, and I was finding the same issue coming up over and over again, which was that as a coach, I would sit across from these women and see how capable and brilliant they were, and yet they could not see that same capability in themselves, and they couldn't see the possibility there and their own readiness to step into more of what they wanted to do in terms of having impact on the world or creating the life they really wanted to create. And then I started blogging about some of those issues, and a couple of years into blogging, I sent a survey out to my blog readers, and I asked all the women who were reading my blog, what is the biggest challenge in your life? And I listed a bunch of things, and a bunch of things that we typically talk about as, the things that are so difficult for women. Work-life balance issues. We don't have enough time. Maybe we have unsupportive people in our life. People-pleasing, right? All that stuff. There were probably 10 choices. And I added to the list, just kind of on an intuitive whim because of what I had been seeing in my coaching practice, I added as one of the challenges, I'm playing small. And I asked people filling out the survey, what's the biggest challenge in your life? And when the responses came back, I'm playing small was the number one choice. It was what people had most frequently said, right? Mm-hmm. So striking. And that's the thing. It's exactly what you're saying, Lisa, that it can look on the outside like we're playing big because maybe we have a prestigious career or whatever, but only we know from the inside, we have that sense of, I know I'm playing small because I know this is really what I'm longing for inside, and I know I've copped out on that. And that feeling is, I think, an epidemic for women today. And it is also, I believe, holding back our whole world because when women come forward and fulfill those callings, they're going to be creating so many revolutions for the good in this world. It's really just what we all need collectively.
Now, when we talk about playing small, there's so many different ways we can see it. And I know for many people, that's where I would come into self-sabotaging at times, where we're moving forward, and we might let something get in our way. And it could be self-doubt. It can be stinking thinking. It can be, for a lot of my listeners, it can be using something like food or alcohol or spending or other challenges that actually get in their way. That's not the problem. That's just the symptom. So let's talk about a little bit about how people play small and what some of those, I know you call it like the inner critic. So let's go into that.
Yeah. Well, one way that I often describe it is that it comes down to, are you being more loyal to your fears or to your dreams? And when you're being more loyal in your life to your fears, you're going to be playing small. And when you can you don't even have to get rid of all your fears, but you're just shifting the weight of your own attention and your own resources and your own backing to the side of your dreams rather than the side of your fears, you start playing bigger. But you're absolutely right that one of the primary things that keeps women playing small is what I call the inner critic. And that is that voice in us of self-doubt, of I'm not ready yet, I'm not qualified for that, who the hell would I be to do that? Oh my God, my upper arms are disgusting. I can't even look at them in the mirror. The constant apologizing, it expresses itself differently in each of us, but it's that inner critical voice that says things to you that you wouldn't want to say to a person that you love. It's not how you would intend to talk to a person that you love. And that voice, it's important to understand that voice is really a expression of a manifestation of our fears. Because playing big and going for our dreams and pursuing whatever true callings are in your heart is very, very scary because it involves leaving the herd. It involves leaving the patterns that you know. It's vulnerable because it usually means sharing your gifts and your voice in the world in some way. And so we feel very afraid of it. And the part of us that is so scared is looking for a way to get out of it. It's looking for, how do I not write the novel? How do I not go for that job I really want? How do I not launch the nonprofit I want to launch? How do I not go start painting again, right? How do I get out of that thing that feels so scary and vulnerable? And one of the best strategies that fear can use is to criticize you into paralysis. And so that's what the inner critic really is. It's just an attempt by your own safety instinct to keep you in the comfort zone of playing small. And when we can start to see that that's what the inner critic is, that it's not rational, that it has nothing to do with reality, then we can start to get a little perspective on it and we don't have to listen to it as much.
Now, I can tell you that no matter where we are, it's funny over the years how I've had that inner critic for different things. And sometimes you think you get rid of it and it shows up in a different way. Because for years, I got over my challenges from 20 years ago and have lived a very happy and healthy life. But then in my career, I found I did things that were safe. Well, to me, easy for me, hard for others, but it was easy. And what I've been doing for the last couple of years publicly, this, which is Fine to Fab, I've been doing privately for 20 years. And I did it because I thought I needed to serve people at a higher level, but I was so afraid of going public that I totally had this voice going on. And sometimes people would wonder, like, why would you have that? And you don't realize it doesn't matter where you are. It just shows up different ways.
That's right. And, we can look at some of the most successful women on the planet, and they all speak about their inner critics. So Twyla Tharp, some people may know Twyla Tharp's work. She's an American choreographer. She's probably one of the most famous American choreographers of our time, probably the most famous woman American choreographer. She's won Tony Awards. She's won every award in the book. And she talks about how when she goes into the studio to create a new dance, she is completely convinced each and every time that this is going to be the dance that's going to show everybody she really was talented, that it's going to be so bad that the audience is going to walk out laughing on opening night. Like very irrational fears, right? Which is how our inner critic goes. I think about her. I think about a couple years ago, Gloria Steinem came to San Francisco, where I live, and gave a talk. And she was giving the talk at Stanford University. The tickets sold out in, I think, about 90 seconds. You had to go in person to get the ticket or have a special status if you could call in. The demand was so immense, for the 3,000 person auditorium. She knew, of course, that she was beloved by this audience, and that you would think that by this point in her career, Gloria Steinem would know she's going to do okay. And she talked about at the beginning of the talk how intimidated she felt because there were so many scholarly colleagues that she respected in the audience, and she had been nervous all day, and she just wasn't sure what she was going to say. It was amazing to hear her stumble through the first few minutes before she kind of found her rhythm and talk about her inner critic narrative. So the way I look at it, if Twyla Tharp and Gloria Steinem and Ariana Huffington, if we can hear all these women talking about their still active inner critics, we can trust that our own inner critics probably aren't going anywhere either. And I really believe, and I always say this is the bad news I have to deliver about the inner critic, is that we don't graduate from our inner critic. Because, again, if you think about what the inner critic is, if it's a strategy your fear is trying to use to keep you in your comfort zone, as long as you're stretching out of it, the critic is always going to come up. And so we're not trying to ever get rid of our inner critics. We're trying to learn how to hear that voice, but not believe it or take it seriously, so that you can move forward anyway and be able to say, oh, I know what that is. That's my inner critic having a little freak out, and then have some tools for how you respond to it in that moment.
Yeah, I actually like to give them names. It doesn't mean we're Sybil or we have other personalities. I just like to identify when it comes up what it is.
That's a great idea. And I do that with women in my program as well, because what that does is once you create a name and a character and oh, that's Mrs. Perfectionist over there, or that's Mrs. Prissy over there, or that's, Cruella de Vil over there, whatever you want to call them. It brings some humor, right? You're laughing. So that's good because we want to lighten up and see the absurdity of the inner critic voice, because it is absurd. And we also want to be able to remember, and this is one of the biggest tools I want to recommend to everybody listening for dealing with your inner critic, is remembering that's not the core of you. That's not all of you. It's one voice within you, and it's actually a very small part of you. And so when we create that character, it helps us remember, oh, that's not all of me. That's this little strain, this voice within. There's also the voice of my wisdom, of my dreams, and I don't want to just be conflating that inner critic voice with the core of who I am.
Absolutely. And what are those? What you say would be the exercises, Tara? Like, are you? What are some things that people can do besides we said we can identify it, to give it a name,
right?
We acknowledge it's a piece of us, not all of us, and to me, sometimes I actually go back to as far as I'm hearing something, and a lot of times it's not even me who's saying it. It's something I heard when I was a kid, because they say, 55% of our beliefs are by the time we're 5 years old, not by us, but by our guardians and people else who've shared that.
Right. That's right. So one of the tools is that creating a character and giving it a name, so that when you hear the voice, you can say, oh, okay, I'm hearing this perfectionist now, right? Another one is to what I call it the thanks but no thanks. And this is because one of the big misconceptions people often have about their inner critic is that we need to get in a battle or an argument with it and be like, screw you, that's not true, I'm fabulous, right? And
yes.
Actually, if anyone watches, I did some appearances on Jillian Michaels' radio show, The Fitness Trainer, and she's really tough, and we were talking about the inner critic, and I was actually coaching her on her inner critic, and she was saying, well, then what do I say to her? Do I say go screw off and go, and she was kind of doing this kick-ass approach, and I asked her, well, how well has that worked in the past? She said, well, not very well, because it doesn't work. If you think about the inner critic as coming from that scared part of us, if you had a scared child in front of you, you wouldn't be like, go screw up, right? You'd be like, it's right. Going to be okay, honey, and this is why. So we want to do that with our inner critic too. So for example, let's say you're applying for a job that you really want that feels like a real stretch, and you're about to send off your resume, and you're hearing a lot of inner critic voice like, this is crazy, who do I think I am, and I'm not qualified, and they're going to laugh when they even see my application. You want to be able to say, okay, inner critic, I hear you. Thank you so much for your input. And sincerely, thank you for your input. I get that you're just trying to keep me safe in the comfort zone here. And I've got this one covered. It's okay. You can relax. So I've got this one covered, I think, is one of the most effective things we can say to our inner critic. And that sincere thanks, but no thanks. It's really acknowledging its input and reassuring it, you don't need to be in charge here. We're going to be okay, and I'm going to make sure that we don't do anything that is too dangerous or too deadly. So that's a very powerful tool. There are also some fun little exercises that are more physical. This can be great if you're more of like a kinesthetic learner, or you like to do somatic things. So one of them is to actually, and it sounds a little bit silly, you mentioned Sybil, so this is sort of in the Sybil category, but it really is effective. So if let's say you're sitting at your computer and you're doing something and you're really hearing your inner critic, you can picture that character that you created for it and actually stand up from your desk, imagine grabbing that inner critic character's hand, walk your inner critic out of the room and say, I'm going to leave you here, in this room, then come back to your computer and say, okay, now it's just me here. And that actually, surprisingly, that's actually very effective. It's kind of saying through your body, okay, we're setting that voice aside right now. Some people also find it effective to do things like you can imagine you have a big volume dial and you just imagine turning the volume dial down on that voice, or imagine the voice fading away from you physically. Those kinds of things are just in the moment, easy little exercises to do.
I love that because a lot of times even anything that seems big that you can make smaller or further away just takes all that attention off of you and makes it lighter to even deal with it. So those are great visualizations to be able to do. Mm-hmm.
Yes. But the most fundamental tool and really, the kind of core of the most effective one is to just start a practice of noticing when you're hearing your inner critic and call it that when you hear it. So, I'm hearing my inner critic right now. That's my inner critic talking. That's the game changer, is when we start being able to say that, because the problems happen, of course, when we think that that voice is the wise voice, when we think that that voice is telling us something important that we've got to listen to.
Right. And again, it's listening and recognizing, but I think one of the biggest things that I've used as well with my clients is the fact of naming that character. I love that, because it just really separates it from this is me and I'm having a challenge to, this is just something that I've repeated over time, but I don't need to be protected. I'm not a 12-year-old or 15-year-old girl who doesn't know what she's doing. There's so many other resources we have today, and to look at it that way is awesome. So I love those tools because they're definitely something anybody can apply immediately to get results, which makes it wonderful to me.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about the fact of, fears, because I know that you're an expert at understanding fear, and I love the difference between your fear and awe and how you talk about that in a spiritual teaching. So I know that not only hearing that inner critic, it's acknowledging the fear and doubt, but moving forward anyway. So can we talk about that a little more?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. Well, a few years ago, I was reading a book by a rabbi named Alan Lew, L-E-W, who sadly passed away not too long ago. And he was a remarkable rabbi who really blended a lot of contemporary spirituality and meditation with interpreting the Old Testament and traditional Jewish texts. And in his book, he talked about how in the ancient Hebrew and in the Hebrew Bible, there are actually two different words that are used for fear. One of the words is pachad, and it's, for people who are curious, the transliteration is spelled P-A-C-H-A-D. And pachad, he defined as it's the fear of things we imagine. It's our projected fear. It's that overreactive fear that sometimes in our contemporary parlance we talk about as the lizard brain, the instinctual part of the brain that just immediately reacts to possible dangers and can really overreact, is doing everything it can to keep us safe and keep us surviving. So that's pachad. And then, very interestingly, he noted that there's a second word that's used in the Hebrew Bible for fear, and that word is yirah, and that's spelled Y-I-R-A-H. And that's the word that is used, for example, when Moses is before the burning bush and he hears the voice of God. When it's describing how he felt, the word that's used is yirah. And it's used at different places in the text. And the way that Rabbi Lew defines that is it's the feeling that overcomes us when we are inhabiting a larger space than we're used to, or when we are suddenly in possession of more energy than we have been in possession of before, or when we are encountering the divine. It's an interesting triad of three meanings. Inhabiting a larger space than we're used to. And of course, you can take that as a literal space or as some kind of emotional or spiritual space. When we're encountering the divine and when we come into possession of more energy than we're used to. Well, when I was reading about that, it was such an aha moment for me because of course, as you know, Lisa, when you're working with clients and you're working with people and their uncovering their authentic lives and their passion, you often run into something that feels a lot like fear as people are discovering that. Like they might, for the first time, I always think about one woman I was working with who was a banking executive and finally articulated she really wanted to leave that career and move to the developing world and do something very service-oriented. And of course, the first time she said that out loud and really admitted it to herself, we both could feel the sacredness in the room, the intensity and the purity of what she was saying and how sacred this longing was to her. And then she immediately became really overcome with this kind of fear-like feeling. And as a coach, I had mostly been trained to talk about that as regular old fear. Oh, fear of leaving your comfort zone, fear of the unknown, blah, blah, blah. But when I read what Rabbi Lou wrote, I thought, no, actually what's going on in those moments is yirah. It's not regular old fear. It's this different feeling that overcomes us when we're coming into contact with the divine, when we're stepping into a larger space. And so I started using this concept in my work with women because I found that when we can start differentiating between those two kinds of fear in our life, when we can say, wait, this one over here is pachad. This is my overreactive, irrational fear coming up again. But this over here, what I'm feeling about this step I want to take in my life is really more like yirah. It has that sacredness to it. It's for a very positive reason. We can start to welcome the yirah in our life and even savor it. And that allows us to just live with it instead of feeling so uncomfortable about it.
That's awesome. What we're going to do, Tara, is we're actually going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to give people an opportunity. If you'd like to call in live, you can call 561-422-4365. You can also Skype in at W4WN Radio, Women for Women Radio. And we will be back right after this short commercial break. And Tara's going to talk a little bit more about fears. And I'm really excited because we're going to talk as well going into identifying your calling, because so many women say they do want to play big and they do want to do more, but we don't necessarily do that. So stay with us and we'll be right back.
Now that I have your attention, ladies, when you need help breaking through the barriers that weigh you down, turning to food is not going to help, and starving yourself along with ongoing feelings of helplessness and frustration will not help either. The cycle of self-sabotage, disordered eating, and stinkin' thinking has to stop, and there is no better way than with other smart, business-savvy women like you who are making the change with best-selling author, licensed master NLP practitioner, and trusted guide, Lisa Lieberman-Wang of FINE2FAB.com. Lisa will help you get that breakthrough you've been waiting for. Go to FINE2FABShow.com right now for all the details of the life-changing 10-week transformational program and the special listeners promotion. It's time to turn your life from feeling fine to being fab. Fabulous, awesome, beautiful. Go to FINE2FABShow.com now.
Feeling tired and achy? Frustrated with allergies? Stress causing you high blood pressure? If you're ready to feel better, have more energy, maintain healthy cholesterol levels, joint flexibility and circulation, looking to reduce inflammation, support healthy glucose levels and sinus relief, plus so much more, Isotonics OPC3 is a food supplement made from a combination of bilberry, grapeseed, red wine, and pine bark extracts, and citrus extract bioflavonoids, all found to be powerful antioxidants. Oligomeric proanthocyanins, OPCs, are bioflavonoids found in fruit, vegetables, and certain tree barks that provide exceptional nutritional benefits to the human body. Studies have shown OPCs to be up to 20 times more powerful than vitamin C and 50 times more powerful than vitamin E in neutralizing free radicals. Isotonics is delivered in an isotonic solution, which means that the body has less work to do in obtaining maximum absorption, as you can drink your vitamins. No pills, binders, or fillers. Buy now at www.amillionproducts.com. Isotonics OPC3.
Welcome back, everyone. We have had such an incredible show so far with Tara, just talking about so many things from our self-doubt and quieting that and the inner critic and getting some great tools, as well as the fears we just talked about a moment ago. And Tara, what's interesting is when you talk about fears, like the original fear, what most of us identify with, but knowing the difference of maybe something that you want to pursue as a bigger calling, there's such a fine line there, even to explain to somebody or even how to identify that. What would be a tip to do that?
Yeah, I think that there really is a different physical quality between the two. So with Fahad, with that more typical overreactive conditioned fear, there can be a real tightness and tension, pressure, heaviness feeling. Yara has more of the feeling of going down on the roller coaster. It's that thrill feeling. There's a kind of trembling to it and more of a quality of awe mixed in with it.
So we have an excitement, not a run in fear and they're going to come eat us.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, the kind of, if anyone who loves performing, if you grew up doing any kind of music or theater or dance performing and you think about the kind of nervousness that you felt on opening night before you went on stage, when you were really nervous and scared, but you also knew you loved to do this and you're excited to do the performance, that's kind of that Yara feeling. It just has a lighter quality of thrill to it rather than pressure. And of course, because we all have that instinct to kind of numb out in the comfort zone, we can actually want to retreat from the edginess of that thrill as much as we would want to retreat from the discomfort of pleasure. They can both feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely, and I've experienced them both. I always look at fear as a different thing. I changed the acronym years ago to face everything and rise above it. So fear to me is just move forward and acknowledge it's there, but we're going to go forward anyway.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's so many things that it comes to, how our feelings are, the interpretation that we put to it. I always call it the story we use and, the meaning we give it. And that can either help you to go forward or back or stay still. And sometimes staying still and not changing is, to me, going backwards because there's nothing in this world that doesn't change. So learning to embrace it is such a big part of growing, knowing there'll be changes. And just because it looks like this doesn't mean it is this. It could be something else. But learning how to embrace that is such a key thing.
Yes. And a lot of that comes down to really trusting life and trusting the unfoldment of the process of life.
Now, I'd love to talk about life in the point of, one of the things I had for years is I wanted to serve at a higher level. And I've been serving for 20 years because that's actually almost 30, but probably my whole life will go there. But in the conscious means of thinking and knowing that I needed to do things to give back, and because I was really grateful for the help I was given to stop hurting myself, I felt like I was supposed to give more. But I always did it at such a level where people didn't know. I did it more like a little angel type of theory. I did it for those that needed it, didn't need anybody else to know. And I still have that mission. One of my missions, I know you wrote an article, 7 Ways to Discover the Calling Oprah Told You to Find. What I thought that was funny about it is, one of my missions is to touch more lives than Oprah, but I don't need to be the one that does that. I can do that through helping one person who helps one person or 10 people or 100 people. And that's really my bigger purpose. But the calling came, and I resisted so strong for I want to say for 10 years, but for 2 conscious years where I literally had a debate with one of Tony Robbins' master trainers who's been with him. I know him 20 years because it was Tony Robbins that helped me 20 years ago. And it turned out that Lauren Slocum had said to me, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I totally fought her tooth and nail, cried, said, no, this is not it. I'm supposed to be helping people make money. She says, no, you're supposed to be helping women. And it was very funny. I woke up one morning, Tara, and I swear to God, this is how it happened. I just woke up one morning and I was just about in tears because I looked at how you even described the process, and I want you to go into that. But I woke up in tears and I said to my husband, I said, handsome, I'm supposed to save lives. And that was it. I was like, I'm supposed to save lives, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but that's what I felt was supposed to be what I was going to be doing, and that's where all this came from. And I went through a lot of the steps you shared about this can't be, and how do I know, and what do? I don't know how to do this.
Yes.
So I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, I really love that you say, I resisted for 10 years, 2 years, because I think 10 years is actually probably more realistic for most of us in terms of how long we resist our callings, 10 years or more, many decades sometimes. Yeah, so first let me share my definition of what a calling is, because there's a lot of different ways that people use that word. My definition of a calling is that it's an assignment that an individual person gets to bring light and love into the world in a particular way. So I believe we all share a common purpose, so we don't have to actually wait around to wondering what our purpose is and trying to find our purpose. We all share a common purpose of being here to bring light and love into the world. I think the world is a very broken place, very not yet finished in terms of its evolution place. And we're all here to help heal that brokenness and bring our collective forward. But then on top of that common layer that we all share of bringing light and love into the world, we each get specific assignments about the way that we're meant to bring light and love into the world. And that specific assignment has something to do with our circumstances, our personality, the opportunities that are in front of us. Were used in the way that makes sense for each of us to be used. And so the calling is just that assignment we get. And of course, we get it from the inside out. Nobody else can give it to us. And so we each have to do the work of listening for and respecting our callings. And I always use that word in the plural, our callings, because I don't believe we just get one assignment for a lifetime. I think our callings are very fluid. They come and go. They begin and end, depending on where we are in our lives. But one of the biggest misconceptions we have about callings is that they're going to feel awesome. And we're going to be like, it's my calling. I'm going to run off into the sunset. It's going to feel so awesome. And now I know. And it's just so joyful. That is not what happens for most of us.
And what happens?
For me. Yeah. And certainly not for me either. What happens is we really resist our callings. And we spend a lot of time denying them, rationalizing them away. We often feel we're not the person, we don't have what it takes to do that thing. The assignment feels way too big for us. We don't feel appropriately qualified. And those are all just normal parts of receiving a calling. And one of the reasons we feel not up to the task is because the calling usually it really reflects the grandeur of our souls and our aspirations to serve. And so from the ego's perspective, the ego looks at that and says, well, that's really grandiose. Who the hell do you think you are? Yeah.
And I think we're hearing an echo here, huh?
I'm hearing a little bit of one too, yeah.
Okay. So, when you say that you're listening for and expecting it, that's a big thing too, where the resistance of this calling and not knowing it and not thinking it. But I love the fact that you said that it's light and love, it's all of us, but your circumstances lead you to it. And the funny thing is that when I was going through things, even with the bulimia and eating disorders and stuff, and spent all those years in hospitalizations, and I used to say to people, and I said it out loud as well as to myself, if God doesn't give you anything you can't handle, and I'm fooling him too. That was how I ended everything. And I'm fooling him too. And I totally trusted, and I always believe that everything happens for a reason, and I know I'm going through this, and I'll figure out what it is. I didn't know it would take 30 years to figure it out, but it did. And that was just one of the things, like you said, I said 10 years, and now I'm listening to what you're sharing, and I'm saying it was probably more like 30, and and I was probably more resistant than I'm thinking I was, but it really becomes all those other self-doubts that brings us back to what you said at the very beginning, from the inner critic and the fear, and can I do this, and how do I do this, and all those other things that come about with it. Now, we unfortunately are so running out of time to even go further into this, so I would love to be able to give that, but I want to make sure that people have a way to contact you and reach out to learn more, because I know you're such a wealth of information and can serve so many incredible women out there. Can you give them information on how to find you and make sure we have that connection, and we'll make sure it's also on the blog?
Sure. The best way to find me is you can go to taramohr.com, which is TARAMOHR.com, or you can just Google, if it's easier. An easy way to find me is Google 10 Rules for Brilliant Women, 10 Rules for Brilliant Women, which is one of my kind of signature articles. And I recommend coming on over to the website, because there's a great free 10 Rules for Brilliant Women workbook that you can just download and start applying some of the concepts for playing bigger in your life right away.
And that's awesome. And what would be a tip that you can give everybody right now to play brilliant and to be their brilliance that we can actually have them take home and apply immediately?
Yeah. Well, I would say the number one thing is to start listening for your inner critic voice. Any voice that's talking to you in a way that you wouldn't want to talk to someone that you really cherish and love and adore. And when you hear a voice in your head talking to you or about you in that way, to start saying, oh, that's my inner critic. That's an irrational liar. And today I'm going to make a choice to not take action based on what that voice is saying, but take action based on my heart's aspirations instead.
That is wonderful. And I know that every one of us can apply that and see some unbelievable results. And I know for a fact it's going to make you feel lighter and brighter, just knowing that what you're hearing isn't true, and you can acknowledge that at that moment. So I want to just thank you, Tara. We actually have one more moment left, and I want to say that this has been so enlightening, and I want to be able to have you back again in the future, because I know that we can give a lot more great information to empower more women. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure, and thank you, everybody who's been listening.
Yes, so remember to come to FINE2FAB.com. You'll be able to check out the blog. We'll have links for you to be able to reach Tara. So if you didn't get the proper spelling of her name, it's www.TARMOHR.com. And again, join us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn at Lisa Lieberman-Wang. And there'll be more to come. There'll be gifts coming in the future. Just going to Tara's site, she'll be giving you the gifts of the Being Brilliant workbook. So take care of that right now. And until next time, remember, you're fabulous, awesome, beautiful. Have an outstanding day.
If you've always wanted someone to connect with on your path to a happy, healthy you, I've got great news. In her #1 best-selling book, Fine to Fab, 7 Secrets of a Successful Woman's Journey Away from Depression, Disordered Eating, and Self-Sabotage, Lisa Lieberman-Wang shares how you can experience your breakthrough just as she did. Start living an authentic life without blame, shame, or years of therapy. Buy now at finetofab.com.
When I see